Okay, hopefully this works. This is a test. It's the first of many, I hope. I'm Serena. This is a new Substack-ish. I've had a Substack account for a while, but like many, felt a little bit disenchanted and disheartened by the reality of just speaking to nobody and seeing lots of posts that say, oh, I didn't have any followers and now I do, like this post or note or whatever it is to introduce yourself. And then having done that, and that to me feels a little bit like engagement farming. But anyway, having done that and then still nothing happening, it's like, this feels like I'm on my first day at school and there's no one to make friends with. And it's really sad. So I thought, well, you know what I do really well is stream, talk to camera, even though I'm a writer. So I thought, okay, let's just do what I normally do on YouTube and Twitch and TikTok and come over here and say hey. So I don't know if this is going to work, but I pulled up an article, and this is actually from Substack, and it's called Starting from Scratch, Advice on Building a Career and Finding an Audience on Substack. And this is actually dated the 6th of March 2024, so it's been more than a year. I don't know how relevant it's going to be today, but let's see if it's useful at all in any way. So this article is written by Anna Codrea Rado. Cool name. And she writes, a week after I got laid off from my staff job as a news editor, I sent out my first newsletter. I must confess that my initial email dispatch wasn't sent on Substack, but only because it didn't exist back then. When I started my newsletter, I'd been an editor at an online magazine, but I didn't have much of a public profile. A few hundred Twitter followers, no book, nor podcast. What I did have was a desire to leave editing behind and become a full-time writer. I moved over from MailChimp to Substack. MailChimp, remember MailChimp? I moved over from MailChimp to Substack at the beginning of 2019, and things took off from there. In my first year on Substack, my audience tripled. By my second year, I landed a deal for my first book, You Are the Business, as a result of the audience I'd built through my newsletter. My readership is now at 17,000 subscribers, and it remains the largest of all the platforms that I'm on. I'm not alone in finding success on Substack, starting from scratch. When I asked on Notes for stories of writers with no pre-existing audience, the response was overwhelming, nearly 600 replies. That sounds a little bit like that engagement kind of posting that I was talking about. I heard from poets, therapists, and even a sommelier who all started with Substacks with no social followings. Georgina Illy, for example, launched a meal planning newsletter in Romanian and just surpassed 24,000 subscribers, 500 of them paid. And then there's Eric Hole. Less than 2 years after launching The Intrinsic Perspective, the neuroscientist was able to quit his job in academia to write his Substack full-time. Edwin Dorsey, who writes investment newsletter The Beer Cave, started his Substack from scratch as a college student in the hope of attracting an employer. He watched it grow by 100 subscribers a week and it soon provided a full-time income. Terrell Johnston of The Half Marathoner recently launched a second publication on a completely different topic, a read-along of Robert Caro's series on President Lyndon B. Johnson. Web designer Matt Kirkland started Dracula Daily, a serialized newsletter of a Gothic novel, as a side project, and it has since attracted over 230,000 fans. Ooh. These creators, whom I like to think of as Substack's native stars, represent a growing community of homegrown talent flourishing on the platform. She continues, some found large audiences and were able to turn their publications into livelihoods. Others built confidence in their writing abilities. All have carved a unique creative path on Substack. I spoke with some of the native stars to find out their best advice for going from scratch to success on Substack. Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's remind ourselves of the author's name of this piece, Anna Codrea Rado. So she spoke to her native stars, like how she's call them that. So here's a quote. I didn't want to write stuff that didn't fill me with joy. So in the charmingly self-deprecating style that's come to be the hallmark of his newsletter, Everything is Amazing, Mike Soden opened our conversation by telling me he was a semi-failed travel writer. Fed up with the frustrations of freelancing, he reached a point where he wanted to take his writing in a different direction and find a way to turn it into a new career for himself. I just didn't want to write stuff that didn't fill me with joy, curiosity, and wonder, he says. Mike had an existing mailing list of 1,000 people interested in his travel writing, but when he launched a Substack about the science of curiosity, I want to check this out, science of curiosity, right up my street, hardly any followed him. Then it was a process of growing it from there, he says. My first year was just experimenting with everything. Not all his experiments worked out. A mistake, he says, he made early on was trying to act like he had a bigger audience than he did. He'd ask people to comment on his post, but with a small readership, engagement was limited, so he switched his approach. I'm small, he says. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Instead, he shared snippets from his newsletter in Twitter threads, writing them with the enthusiasm he had for his discoveries. I love that. In February 2022, one of his Twitter threads, a post about the Zanclean mega flood, went, is that how you say it? Zanc, Zanclean mega flood, went viral and reached 10 million people. He said, I had 6,000 free signups and over 100 paid in about 4 days, Mike says. Now Everything is Amazing has nearly 23,000 subscribers and 640 paid. That was the point when my newsletter became pretty much my full-time job. Another creator says, I don't have to wait for permission. That's Tiffany Philippou, David Roberts. They have a newsletter. Tiffany has one called Tough Love. I'm just scrolling through. Sparks from Culture by David Roberts. I'm cultivating a community, says Fog Chaser, who's a musician based in the Pacific Northwest. Let's continue. You can be anonymous and have a very successful newsletter, and that is, it's called Petition, and it's anonymous. So this is, I'll link the author, this piece, because that's only fair to credit work that we use, and let me know your thoughts. But if you're new to me, I'm Serena. I'm from London, born and brought up here. I'm Gen X / millennial. Like, does it matter? Apparently it does. I have a career in communications, strategic communications, reputation management. I'm also doing a postgrad in systems thinking. It's a master's in science in the UK. I'm on the last legs of it. I have multiple YouTube channels, talk about media literacy, politics, as well as creating content for creators and entrepreneurs to level up their strategic thinking. So I use all my public relations experience. I'm a chartered practitioner, and I also use my systems thinking knowledge to really help other creators and entrepreneurs, anyone who's basically building a brand in public. I am a multidisciplinary creative. I've always written, always danced, been qualified as a yoga teacher for nearly 20 years. So I've been sort of multifaceted, allowed myself to be multi-passionate. I'm an adoptive special needs parent, do the whole single parent thing. I'm quite critical of marriage, having been married for a decade and now alone for a decade. And I wouldn't trade my solitude for anything. So I'm one of those. Whatever that is. Apparently on TikTok I'm one of those. But it's good to introduce myself here. I don't know if anyone's going to watch this. If a single person has watched this or heard this, then let me know. Because, just talking into the note, even tumbleweed would be great. At least tumbleweed is some kind of substance that can be seen. At the moment, I don't know. Let's see. But I might have to do another one of these. I hope my mic has worked. I don't know if it's picked up. I know it's picked up my camera. I'm not sure if it's picked up my mic. Let's hope the sound wasn't coming through from my Mac. In that case, I apologize because the sound wouldn't have been fantastic. But if it... Oh no. It was my Mac the whole time. My bad. I'll figure it out. Okay, off I go. Welcome do all those wonderful things, and I'll see you at some point.